Commons. So we have Pierre Poilievre going down on these questions, and there's a lot to know on this one. This scandal is just huge. Just enjoy.
22nd, that you heard we mentioned in any of your conversations with members of the government?
Mr. Robidoux?
Mr. Chair, the first time it was not in a discussion, it was mentioned, it was an email from Rachel Wernick to Michelle Kovacevic at Finance, where
what was the date?
It was the 16th of April, and it was not in the context at that time of the Canada Student Service Grant, because that concept was not yet existing at that time. It was a context of some other proposal we were working on for volunteering.
After March the 1st, when was the first time after March the 1st, when was the first time you heard we or the Kielburgers ever mentioned in your communications with ministers or their staff?
Who's that to?
Mr. Robidoux.
Mr. Robidoux?
With the minister, which minister and which staff? All the ministers, or any? I could say for sure there was no mention of we with any ministers. I think there was no mention in verbal discussion of we with any political staffer. Again, it was only an email between myself and the Office of Minister Qualtrough when this was raised only once. And again, in the context of something else.
Between March 1st and April 16th, were we or the Kielburgers ever mentioned in communications you had with your deputy minister?
Again, until April 16th, March 1st to April 16th, just to make sure.
Yes.
Not to my recollection.
Did you ever discuss or in any of the communications you had between March the 1st and April 16th, were we or the Kielburgers ever mentioned in your communications with PCO?
I really don't believe.
Have you ever spoken to anyone in the we organization?
As far as of my knowledge, no.
According to Michelle Kovacevic, there was an April 16th call, and I'm going to read her transcript. She says, according to my records, the first mention of we to me was on April 16th. On that call on April 16th, it would have been Rachel Wernick and also the Associate Deputy Minister, end quote, and that's you. So she says that was the first time she ever heard we mentioned in the COVID context. Was it you or Rachel Wernick who mentioned we in that April 16th call?
Again, I will return to the April 16 email between Rachel and Michelle Kovacevic, where I was CC, where we was mentioned after that email. There was an agreement to get together and have a call at noon. We had that call at noon where we continued the discussion that was in that email about what was possible and not possible to do for volunteering. And I couldn't tell at that meeting who mentioned we.
So it was an email from we?
No, it was an email
about we.
It was an email from Rachel Wernick to Michelle Kovacevic answering one of her questions about volunteering, and where we was mentioned. It was clearly not the core of the email. It was in passing. And then following that email or that exchange of emails, They
Yeah.
agree. They agree that we should get together in a call, and we did get together in a call at noon. That the call you're talking about, that Rachel and
That's where you
Michelle.
began. That was the first time you heard discussion that we might deliver the student service grant.
Absolutely not. As I said, it was about something else, and it was all about. At the time, we were working on the Canada Service Corps proposal. We were thinking about more for volunteering, and we started not too far after that to work on the I Want to Help platform that was built here at the SDC.
So
And the idea there, if I could finish my answer, the idea was to use we or someone like we, youth organization out there, non-for-profit, that could make sure that the I Want to Help platform would be well known by the youth in Canada through social media. So
Last fairly tight question, Pierre.
and in that call was the Canada Student Service Grant mentioned?
These terms were never mentioned in that call, I'm pretty sure.
No, not the terms, the program. What
The
would
program
become
was
the program?
the program. No, was not yet. No, it was not yet something that was existing at that time in the form that we know. We knew it when it was launched. It was not yet existing.
Okay, you'll have another round anywhere, Mr. Poilievre. Going to Ms.
Yes, we have Pierre Poilievre coming up after this, but first we have MP Derwitz. She's a Liberal, so things. And the Bloc today, some breaking news, is calling for the resignation of the Morneau, Jagger, and Trudeau.
Zerowitz, followed by Ms. Fortin. Mr. Fortin. Ms. Zerowitz.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I want to say a huge thank you to you, Minister Qualtrough, as well as to Associate Deputy Minister Benoit Robidoux for joining us today. And in addition, Minister, I just want to say a huge thanks to you for your extraordinary work and leadership in supporting Canadians over these last few months as Canada's trying to find its way through this unprecedented pandemic. Now, since the lockdown, our federal government's put out 70 emergency programs at a cost of over $200 billion. You, in your opening remarks, mentioned that on April 22nd, we announced a $9 billion program. It included 4 key programs. One of them was the Canada Student Service Grant, but there were 3 other big programs that you were in charge of: the Canada Emergency Student Benefit, the creation of up to additionally 116,000 jobs, and adjustments to the Canada Student Loans and Grants. And I know that students were also able to stack up these programs as well. And the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because I think that there might be some confusion out in the public where if we're not offering the Canada Student Service Grant, there's no support out there for students. But indeed, there is. The Canada Student Service Grant was only up to $900 million, and this is all the student support is $9 billion. So my question to you, Minister, is can you give us a sense of the success of the other programs, particularly the 3 that you oversaw, and how they have supported and benefited students?
Well, thank you for the question. Let me give you some quick numbers on the student emergency support student benefit. We've helped 722 unique applicants. So 682,000 young people have accessed the CESB. We've had 1.8 million applications. 1.5 of those were at the $1,250 a month mark, and 303,000 of those were at the $2,000 a month mark. We've paid out about $2.5 billion under this program alone. We have created tens of thousands of jobs, but let me speak directly to, because I didn't do as good a job yesterday as I could have at the other committee of explaining how these measures are a comprehensive package and how indeed they are stackable. In other words, students have access to a number of the measures. So a student who can receive the CESB, which is $1,250 or $2,000 a month, can also get a larger Canada student loan when they go back to school in the fall, and that same student may have their existing student loan payment put on hold because of the moratorium. Additionally, that student can earn up to $1,000 per month and still get the CESB. And finally, under the CSSG, they could have accumulated volunteer hours earning up to $5,000 grant.
if I ever signed a contract with the wrong company, I would guarantee to lose my job when I was working in the plumbing. Now, it's different for government, apparently. They can just say, oh, well, someone did their due diligence. Now, here's NP410 of the block, who just lays out all Canadians' exasperation.
Had any obligations for responsibility for We Charity Foundation? Were there any other guarantees that you were looking at with respect to We Charity Foundation? Did you ensure that there was proper protections in place?
Not been the file to that level of detail. I wasn't a party to any of the discussions that were had around who would be the entity signing. That was completely within the lane of Minister Chagger.
Et si j'ai bien compris vos réponses d'hier,
And if I understood correctly, you never read any audit reports from We Charity Foundation or We Charity. Did you know whether anybody else, to your knowledge, at the Cabinet had done this to ensure what type of guarantee We Charity Foundations could offer?
Let me clarify. When I received the briefing prior to Cabinet Committee, I was briefed on the recommendation, and there was no flags with respect to the Public Services recommendation. Certainly every other minister at that table had the same or similar briefing and the same information in front of them. I wouldn't want to suggest at any point that us collectively, that we didn't do our own homework preparing for these meetings. We knew what we were approving, and we completely deferred to the recommendation of the Public Service.
mais comment pouvez-vous dire que vous saviez?
How can you say that you knew if you didn't even know that the signer of the contract was not We Charity, contrary to what you were told? You were misled at the Cabinet table. It wasn't We Charity. It was We Charity Foundations, two completely distinct companies with distinct personnel, directors, so you were misled. So how can you said that you knew what you were doing, and how could you have agreed to that? You didn't really realize that you were dealing with We Charity Foundation.
Privy to that level of detail, I was confident in approving it's how I...
That wasn't just a detail.
Briefed on the recommendation of We Charity, and I supported that recommendation based on the background work that the Public Service had done.
That'll be the last question, Mr. Fortin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Écoutez, Madame...
One last question. Thank you. I understood your testimony. I respect that, but with all due respect, we're not talking about a little detail here. You said $43.5 million to a program to manage a $9 billion program. But in fact, you're dealing with another company. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think this is just a simple detail. Weren't you upset when you found out that you had been misled, that there had been no checks done?
Spoke with my own team about this. I also will defer to the Minister of Finance, officials at Finance, the rigor of Treasury Board oversight on this, the due diligence that the Public Service did. This was something that was very well prepared and thought through, and I have every confidence that people did their homework and that they, all these teams had eyes on this level of detail. I did not.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister Qualtrough, for your presence here today. You made important comments yesterday. You stated that the government had dropped the ball and that there was no excuse or justification for the decision. And I think those are appropriate comments. I'm interested in knowing, given the Prime Minister's comments around the due diligence that was supposed to take place, when did you become aware of the clear appearances of a conflict of interest, both with the Prime Minister's family, but also with Minister of Finance and his family, and also his travel history?
I'm not being difficult, but as I mentioned, I knew the Prime Minister and his wife had spoken at We events. I didn't know any further detail about that until after the announcement on June 25th.
Okay, thank you for that. So you were unaware. The issues that are myriad that have come up as a result of this decision, and one of the clear concerns that have been raised is the probable violation of minimum wage laws, the probable violation of labor standards, the probable violation of teachers' codes of ethics across the country. All of these have been raised as massive concerns around this the scandal. When did you become aware of the fact that minimum wage laws, labor standards, teachers' codes of ethics had not been examined? And my second question to you is, if this had gone through your ministry, what would you have done to vet this program to ensure that these violations didn't take place?
Really important questions. And first, let me contextualize that. And again, yesterday I failed to make the connection sufficiently between the student benefit and the CSSG. We knew students could get $5,000 to $8,000 of student support in addition to the $5,000 they could get. So we really saw this as a suite of measures. And in fact, some of the criticism around the amount of the initial student benefit was, why wasn't it as generous as CERB? And our response, and my response was, well, that's because students have access to other financial measures like the CSSG. In terms of your specifics around labor laws, again, that Benoit may be a better person to ask about that from a due diligence point of view. And I'm not sure I should speculate on how I would have personally handled this file. Certainly we all have our own approaches to things, and I prefer not to comment on how a colleague managed a file or how I would have without all the information. That I just don't have enough information to fairly speculate. Okay.
But what you're saying is you were unaware of these things until they came out in the media?
Yes. Yes. Well, okay. What I will say is I was aware that we were addressing, I was satisfied that we were addressing the, any perception that people weren't being paid enough by the student benefit piece coupled with the CSSG. But I was also very comfortable with providing volunteer opportunities, and I know others aren't.
I think you can understand that when people hear your responses and hear the response of other ministers, it is not clear that people knew what they were approving when Cabinet actually approved this. Now, were you aware prior to the decision around the financial problems that We Charity was having, and the fact that their board, certainly we've heard testimony from the chair of the board of directors, the board has been effectively fired. Were any of those facts brought to mind before the decision?
I was not.
Okay. Was there any discussion around the ability of We to actually provide services in French? As I'm sure you're aware from media reports, that was actually going to be farmed out to a company that has strong historic links to the Liberal Party, which compounds the scandal, of course. Was there any, were you aware at all about the fact that the charity could only provide services in English and wouldn't be able to provide services in Quebec?
Well, of course I can't discuss what was discussed at either committee or cabinet, but I was confident in my supporting the recommendation that this program was going to be able to be delivered in both official languages in all the provinces and territories. That's something I personally look for, and was satisfied with the level of information I had that would happen.
But the discussion about farming this out to a company that has historic links to the Liberal Party, that was not something that came up. So you didn't know the how. You just felt that there was sufficient assurances that the program would be offered in both official languages. I have
last question, Peter.
I have a final question, which is we. Traditionally, and you would know this having spoken at one of their events, works predominantly with high school students, not with university students. Did that issue ever come up? I mean, we've raised the violation of the codes of ethics of teachers across the country. But we and the CSSG simply don't mesh in terms of the clientele. It would be largely university. And my final point or question is around the president of the Public Service Alliance of Canada, who has testified here that the public service could have and should have provided the program. Was there any consultation with the president of the Public Service Alliance of Canada before this decision was made?
A bunch of questions in there. Your very last question, I wasn't involved in any discussions. I don't know if other ministers or the lead minister on this did. As I said yesterday, I respect the desire for public servants to dig in and deliver everything. My assessment was we had, reached their capacity. Their bandwidth was already being stretched. In addition, I had seen us deliver successfully programs through third parties. So this wasn't extraordinary. This wasn't only because the public servants couldn't do this. This is very much because this was really the best way to do this, in my opinion, was through a third party who could give the individualized, almost concierge-like support to young people and organizations.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. We'll go to 5-minute round now. We'll start with Mr. Poilievre and then on to Mr. Fragaskatis. And we may have time for a third CPC question in here later. So if somebody wants to think about it, I don't have them on my list. Mr. Poilievre, 5 minutes.
Mr. Robidoux, was it just you, Ms. Warnick, and Ms. Kovacevic on the April 16th call or meeting?
I will have to get back to you. I don't know that. I would think that there was more people on the call, but I couldn't tell you who was on the call.
Would there have been any exempt staff on the call?
No, not at that time. No.
And would that call have been recorded?
I don't believe.
All right. Then there was another meeting on the 18th with Madam Kovacevic and Madam Warnick. Were you involved in that meeting?
I was invited. I tried to find. In fact, I was unsure. I was there at the call, and I checked my phone. I asked to have my phone logged to be checked, and I was on that call.
And Ms. Kovacevic says that it was Ms. Warnick who suggested we, and then Ms. Warnick says that it was Ms. Kovacevic. Do you remember who actually made the suggestion to involve we in the delivery of this or any other program?
Again, I would say that to that question, at that call, it was no question about that program and involving we in the delivery of that program, because that program was not yet kind of designed. So it was about, in the context, as I said, of the rest of the package, about the I Want to Help platform. And
did you suggest to Ms. Warnick that she contact Mr. Kielburger?
As far as I could remember, she herself, in fact, in email, said that she was going to get in touch with we. So that's in the documents you will get. It's in the emails. She said that in the email at that specific meeting on the 18th. Who said what to who? I have no specific recollection of that.
Do you have any? Did you ever hear it mentioned that ministerial staff were interested in engaging we for any purpose after March 1st?
No, I didn't hear that at the time after March 1st. That specific question about the fact they would be interested in contacting them? No, not. Well, again, you may. I need to be careful here because there was the first proposal that was the social entrepreneurship proposal for youth, who was with Minister Ng. So. But in the context of in the context of the measure we're looking at, no.
Were you aware that the CSSG was pulled from the cabinet agenda on March the 8th? Excuse me, on May the 8th.
I was told. I think I was told by Rachel. that the item was pulled. That she
And-
was.
And what due diligence did your department conduct between May 8th and May 22nd?
As I never had a chance to do any remarks at the beginning, but after April 22nd, I was no longer involved in that file. And because the file was handled by Rachel for Minister Chagar under the direction of the Senior Associate Deputy Minister Gina Wilson at the Department of Heritage. So I was no longer involved after that.
So you had no involvement in the period that
no,
followed?
no
All right.
direct involvement after April 22nd.
All right, now the question for the minister, you've had 24 hours to check and find out, has we given back the full sum that your department gave we in the first instance? Is the money back in the hands of your department? Yes or no?
Well, what I have learned is the ESDC is in the process of terminating the agreement with we, and the discussions are ongoing.
Just let her
As the
answer,
minister,
Mr. Poilievre.
It is not my file. I'm not the lead. The Minister Chagar has said today that we intend to pay all the money back. I understand that as part of the negotiations for the termination of the agreement, the department has outlined to We Charity Foundation the process for how they should repay the funds, but it is not. I don't have that level of detail. I can't say either way. I don't have that detail. I can't say either way. I don't have that detail.
Excuse me.
Last
My
question,
is
Mr.
very
Poilievre.
simple. When will taxpayers get their money back? When?
I don't have that detail.
It's not a detail. It's a lot of money. Millions of dollars is not a detail, Minister.
I think the minister did say she doesn't know the detail. Maybe the next minister will. I don't know.
Maybe the next minister's right, because I don't think she's going to last in that position too much longer. Leave your comments down below, like, subscribe. And the question of the day is, do you think someone's will lose their position after this? Have a good day.